Shalom and Maranatha. Welcome to the commentary video for Jubilees, Chapter 4. So there's a few things I want to go over. First of all, we're going to display the text. I'm actually reading from the physical copy of this text. I prefer to read from the book, personally. I understand that whatever you see on screen does not exactly correspond to what is being read, but that's just better than the image that was there for the first three videos for this the narrative. So let's go over what we read. It's interesting to me that we don't really get the names in Genesis of the wives, and to be frank, they're marrying their sisters. They have no other choice. There's no other women on the earth, so they had to copulate with somebody, and that was their physical sisters. And then eventually we see that they started marrying the daughters of their uncles, which are their cousins, and that's actually lawful according to Torah to do that. I believe even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were also doing likewise, marrying their cousins, or at least close relatives. In Abraham's case, I believe that was his half-sister, Sarah was. But marrying cousins, as some cultures still do today, is not against Torah. That is within that's within the moral confines of the law, the Torah specifically. I think that's just something that the media pushed to say, this is going to cause disease and congenital deformities or congenital problems. But that is something that is within Torah. I'm not going to argue that it isn't, because that is what is done, and you can see that throughout the scriptures. Okay, and then we looked here about he was the first among men who learned writing and knowledge. So this is talking about Enoch. He was the first to write a testimony. It's interesting, talking about the calendar there. And personally, I did read Enoch, and I did not see anything that contradicted what is in Torah. And the reason I say this is because there are two calendars that are pointed out. There's the lunar calendar, which is used to reckon the high holy days, the festivals. But then you have a separate calendar, which is the solar calendar, which is used to determine how long a year is, or at least according to the sun, the solar year, which is separate than the lunar year. So I'm not sure how to reconcile that, but those are two separate things. Okay, the Watchers, that was not specifically mentioned in Genesis. It did mention the sons of God, and some people believe those are angels of God. But here we see the term Watchers used, and I believe the Book of Enoch also uses this terminology. And it's interesting to note the angels, or at least the Watchers, or not the Watchers, the angels brought Enoch into the Garden of Eden, of all places. That's interesting. It says that on account of the wickedness, God brought the waters of the flood upon all the land of Eden. So that's an interesting... some people believe Eden was preserved and kept away, like set apart from the rest of the earth. But here it says in Jubilees that the waters of the flood went on Eden. And we can see that Enoch was familiar of at least some sort of offering, because people like to argue, did Adam and Eve, did Cain and Abel know about the laws about the offerings, the sacrifices and offerings? And it seems they actually did, or at least partly so. Maybe not the full extent of it as it relates to the feast days, but that's speculation. We really don't know. And then the 4 places on earth that Yah has, or not that he doesn't own it all, but these are 4 special places to him: the Garden of Eden, the Mount of the East, this mountain you're on right now, which is Mount Sinai, and Mount Zion, which is where his throne will be. Mount Sinai, according to Joel Richardson and many scholars, is actually in Saudi Arabia, Jabal al-Lawz, if I'm not mistaken, the Mount of Moses or Musa. The Mount of the East, I'm not sure which mount that is. Please comment what mountain you believe that is. Other things of note here regarding Adam, regarding the statement made, on that day thereof you shall die. Now, not technically the 24-hour period of a day, but more so the 1,000-year reckoning of how one day to the Lord is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years as one day, basically equating a millennium as one day. Adam technically, well, by that definition of at least of what a day is, died in that day because he did not reach 1,000 years. He died at 930 years old, or completed. And this is an interesting verse as well. For verse 31, I believe in the book of Jasher, it describes Cain being killed by either his grandson or great-great-grandson, Tubal-Cain, if I'm not mistaken. He was shot through with an arrow, and they discovered, to their horror, that it was their great-great-grandfather, Cain, and then I believe his father, not Cain's father, but the father of Tubal-Cain, or perhaps his son, was angry, slapped him, and killed his son too. So not only did they lose Cain that day, but also his son as well, because he hit him so hard. But that's according to the book of Jasher. This seems to be a disagreement or discrepancy, unless the only way you can reconcile this is if you say, if you use an analogy that a family is like a house, and every member of that family is like a stone in that house, and you see that analogy used of believers being like pillars in the temple. So if we use that kind of analogy, that metaphorical word pictures, then it still makes sense. It still fits with the narrative of Jasher. But if we're talking about literal stones, then no, doesn't fit. And this interesting law, or I should say something that was ordained, with the instrument with which a man kills his neighbor, he will be killed by the same. So that seems to be referring to the just judgment of God. And I think that's it for the commentary for this chapter. So thank you very much. This is the Book of Jubilees, Chapter 4 commentary, and we'll look at Chapter 5 coming up next.